Saludos gamers, les habla Jan de Video Games and the World y bienvenidos a la tercera temporada de Video Games and the World. Last season, I had a lot of fun writing and uploading episodes of various interesting topics, histories of franchises in video games, character representations, and many more. This year, I hope to have more episodes in seasons 1 and 2. But of course, we have lots of interesting topics to talk about, as well as console histories, game series histories, and more. Since this is Hispanic Heritage Month, considering that I am a Latino myself, we will talk about Latino characters in video games as well as developers. Now, many people ask, why are there not enough Latinos, while others say we need more? Well, I assure you there are plenty of them. Some of them playable and others are NPCs with an interesting backstory. Because to me, character representation is not about the person's race, gender, sexual orientation, or ethnicity. It's about who he or she is, what the character does, when they do it, and why they must do what they are destined to do. Let us begin with a little story about Hispanic Heritage Month, then the games. If you like to, you can skip it by clicking on the time linked in the description. Enjoy! So what exactly is Hispanic Heritage Month? It is a time to celebrate the social, political, and economic achievements of Latin Americans and Hispanics in the USA. It starts on September 15 and ends in October 15 every single year. 50 years ago, the Hispanic Heritage Month was established by legislation sponsored by Representative Edward R. Roybal and first proclaimed by President Lyndon Johnson in 1968. Then 20 years later, on August 17, the commemorative week was expanded by legislation sponsored by Representative Esteban Edward Torres and implemented by President Ronald Reagan in 1988 to cover a 30-day period. September 15 was chosen as a starting point for the celebration because it is the anniversary of independence of 5 Latin American countries: Costa Rica, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. All declared independence in 1821. In addition, Mexico, Chile, and Belize celebrate their independence days on September 16, 18, and 21 respectively. This month also celebrates the culture and heritage of the Hispanic and Latino community in the USA, as well as their achievements in sciences and the arts. We all remember all these people who fought against discrimination in academia over 50 years ago, such as Sal Castro and many of his students, along other Chicano students who walked out to protest. They protested against various injustices in their schools, such as being punished for speaking Spanish in school, janitorial duties as punishment, and so many other unfair things. These protests were known from then on as the East LA walkouts. These walkouts created something very positive. Before the walkouts, not many Latinos were in college, but after the walkouts, the number of Latino students in colleges and universities increased across the nation. The East LA walkouts were not the only thing that brought change, but also the Cubans that came here fleeing their country for a new start away from the regime of the late Fidel Castro. Not to mention how many Cubans, Dominicans, and Puerto Ricans migrating here and bringing their music here, which enchanted not only their people living in the States, but so many non-Hispanics. In the arts, Frida Kahlo is one of the first most remembered artists in Latin America, and her paintings are something very memorable. Other famous painters and artists are Diego Rivera, Ligia Clark, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and Vic Muniz. In science, there are many Latinos that you do not know of. There are Carlos Juan Finlay, Mario J. Molina, Ellen Ochoa, Cesar Milstein, Franz A. Cordova, Inés Mexia, Juan M. Maldacena, Albert Baez, Helen Rodriguez Trias, and many more. Latino authors known for their excellence are José Martí, Julia de Burgos, Sandra Cisneros, Gloria E. Ansaldúa, Cristina Enríquez, Junot Díaz, Julia Álvarez, Pablo Neruda, Paulo Coelho, Gabriel García Márquez, Raquel Cepeda, and many more. In sports, Latinos have been very popular in baseball, basketball, soccer, called fútbol by Latinos, the NFL at times, but most especially boxing. Latin music became very popular since Lidia Mendoza, Carmen y Laura, and the Mendoza sisters with norteño music. Not to forget that Richie Valens enchanted people with La Bamba and the Champs with their hit song Tequila. Fania Records wrote many great singers to fame such as Johnny Pacheco, Celia Cruz, Willie Colon, Héctor Lavoe, Rey Barreto, Richie Ray, Bobby Cruz, Bobby Valentin, and so on. These singers paved the way for many other Latino singers and musicians that we truly love today. Rulo Valentino's Latin Lover role opened the doors for the Latinos in Hollywood, not to forget women like Maria Montez, the queen of Technicolor. Today in Hollywood, there are so many Latinos who are enchanting us, winning us over with many other movies, TV shows, and more. Not just in telenovelas, but also in Hollywood themes as well. Latinos have achieved a lot of things in this country and we are still going strong. I believe that all Latin Americans, whether male, female, straight, or LGBT, should be free to pursue their own dreams and shape their destiny in this country. But enough of that. It's time to start with the games. Enjoy! Do you think that there are no Latino game developers in the gaming industry? Short answer, yes there are. Although the number is a small percentage, it's still growing and going strong. It all started with a little game titled Kingdom Rush. It did the improbable and took the world by storm. The success of the online strategy game did more than bring riches and fame to the then unknown developer, Ironhide Game Studio. It also placed a much needed spotlight on a game developer from an unlikely place, Latin America. Since then, more Latin American game developers have sprung up and carved their own niche in the industry. Website Game Dev Latinos continues to keep the spotlight on these developers. The website Game Dev Latinos was founded in 2015 on Hispanic Heritage Month as a hashtag/Twitter campaign that highlighted game developers from Latin America. The idea came from Como se dice Nerds Hispanic Heritage Month Game Jam that celebrated the contributions of Latin Americans in the gaming industry. The Twitter campaign turned out to be more popular than anticipated as lots of people responded positively and were eager to learn more about Latino game developers. GDL stated the following: "When I started in game development, I didn't know any Latinos in the industry. As I started seeing them and finding more and more people doing things, I thought, wow, I feel better about what I'm doing, because I see these other Latinos doing great things at these other companies." GDL's founder decided to continue and expand on the original idea with a Tumblr site, which is also supported by Facebook and Twitter page. The site features brief posts about Latin American game developers, either a company or a person, and has begun to include Latinos who are active in the gaming industry, such as games bloggers despite not being a developer or programmer. Their hopes is that the site can grow to act as a virtual meeting place for Latino developers and assist them in future collaborations. There's also an online community called Comunidad de Desarrolladores de Videojuegos, Duval. It's dedicated to uniting and supporting Spanish-speaking game developers across the globe. Another one that is well known is Como se dice Nerd. It is a Latino-run online community dedicated to promoting Latino nerds and their contributions to games and geekdom. Based in Brazil is Black River Studios, known for exciting digital experiences like Jake and Tess, Finding Monsters Adventure, Rococo VR, and Galaxy 11 Invasion. 502 Studios is based in Guatemala. It's the creator of mobile titles Escape the Mind, Drowsy Mousy, Arithmos, and Mighty Strike Team Pocket Missions. There are various Latino game developing companies, but what about those who develop? Here are the following. Mariano Caballero is an independent game developer based in Cordoba, Argentina, who has been working on titles like Cinquedea and Circon. Hector Llanos is a USA-based Latino programmer who has worked on Alicia Keys' The Journals of Mama May and Lily plus Mookie, The Lost Temple of Enki, Lefty and the Rat-tastic Road Rally, Paper Fox, and more. Sandra Honigman is a Peruvian-based American game developer based in New York, USA. She creates digital and tabletop games like Annabelle, Inmigración, Finder, Mean Girls the Game, and Colrufobia. Christopher Figueroa, Mexican-American game programmer based in Seattle, Washington, is one of the developers behind indie games Imagine Me and Snow Horse. He's also worked on 47 plus games during his time at Activision, and he currently spends his days working as an engineer at Unity. Sal Becker, Brazilian programmer / artist based in New York City, is one of the developers behind If a Tree Falls in the Forest, She Blended Me with Science, and more. La Chica Gamer is a Puerto Rican geek culture blogger who focuses on video game news while being a great supporter of Latinos in the gaming community. There are various developers based in different Latin American countries. Some of them are in charge of marketing, others will do storytelling, design, and many other things. Hopefully, we can see some good things made by Latino developers in the near future as well. If you're a Latino like me, seeking a job in the gaming industry to make a game of your own, I advise you this. Do it. You can do it. Puedes hacerlo y no te rindas. Y así, al final, triunfarás. We've seen various Latino characters in video games. When video games started to emerge, most Latino characters were in sports video games like baseball, basketball, and especially football, also known as soccer. When it comes to Latino superheroes and action heroes, which of these people come to mind? Cisco Ramon, aka Vibe, Batmanuel, Max Guevara, Turquesa, Zafiro, Jaime Reyes, Miss America, Jessica Cruz, Cyber Six, Zorro, Firebird, The Question, Rosita Espinosa, Daniel Salazar, Robbie Reyes, Miles Morales, El Mariachi, the Cortez family from Spy Kids, Bunker, Kyle Rayner, Gangbuster, Maya Herrera, Isaac Mendez, Puss in Boots, Rocky De Santos, Tyler Navarro, and many more. Now, people say that we need more Latino representation in movies, in video games. I agree with that. We can do that by creating characters of our own from our own imaginations. And now, let us start with Latino characters in gaming. Enjoy. Street Fighter is one of the most popular fighting games. Not to forget, its character roster has a lot of diversity. These characters come from places such as the USA, Japan, China, Russia, India, Thailand, Spain, France, Italy, Germany, England, and Jamaica. But let's not forget that there are also Latino characters from Brazil and Mexico. Blanca is one of the most memorable characters in the franchise, known for his acrobatic and electric attacks. When he is angered, he is like a wild animal who is let loose from his cage. Blanca's real name is Jimmy, who as a child was lost in a plane crash in Brazil. He then has an emotional reunion with his mother in his Street Fighter II ending. Despite his beast-like appearance, he is very humble and docile and loves his family connections and children. His best friends are Sakura and Dan Hibiki. Vega has always been one of the most well-known Spanish characters in the Street Fighter series. Although he's a Spaniard, he's still very popular among fans of the Street Fighter series. So what do we know about him aside from being an assassin for Shadowloo? Well, Vega was born into a privileged family, but the status dwindled, forcing his mother to remarry for financial security. As he matured, he studied bullfighting, which is a cultural tradition, and then traveled to Japan to study martial arts, especially the art of ninjutsu. His mother was killed by his hideous stepfather because he felt she did not respect him. In revenge, Vega killed his hideous stepfather. Vega hates everything that is ugly because he believes that beauty is a symbol of courage, heroism, and strength, and ugliness is something evil that needs to be purged. Another Latino character is El Fuerte, who first appeared in Street Fighter IV. El Fuerte is a Mexican luchador who was mentored in the ways of lucha by the teacher who also taught El Stingray, the legendary luchador Meteorito Jr. It is known that El Fuerte has a friendly rivalry with Zangief and is a huge fan of Japanese wrestler arm Mika, according to the Yudan comics of Street Fighter. El Fuerte's mask is based on famous luchador El Santo, one of the most iconic luchadores enmascarados. T-Hawk is commonly brave, tough, selfless, noble-spirited, centered, and fearless, but equally grumpy, cold, brutish, unemotional, and apparently unsympathetic. His lack of emotion display mostly comes from the suffering and devastation inflicted by M. Bison towards his people and sacred homelands. Such hatred grew even more powerful in Street Fighter Alpha 3 when T-Hawk discovers that his childhood friend and lover, Julia, was turned into Julie, one of the Shadowloo's top-ranking female assassins known as the Dolls, under Bison's brainwash. Despite his externally hard demeanor, T-Hawk is actually a warm-hearted, compassionate man, as evident in several of his artworks where he shows unquenchable affection for native animals, who cites revenge solely on the purpose of rescuing his long-lost people and restoring his ruined homelands back to his former glory. Sean Matsuda and his older sister Laura Matsuda are Brazilian jiu-jitsu fighters, and they care about one another. Sean Matsuda is eager to prove himself as a strong fighter and hates being referred to as weak. He often makes a point of bringing up Dan as a shining example of weakness, and thus someone he hates being compared to. He is also a huge fan of Ken Masters and wishes to learn from him in hopes of becoming a better person. Additionally, Sean reads a magazine named Masters Online Karate at the time of Street Fighter V. Sean is also somewhat afraid of his older sister, Laura. Laura has a free-spirited and energetic personality and enjoys thrills. Similar to Makoto, she has a desire to promote her family's fighting style. Laura also likes to give advice to others, and her character-specific versus quotes imply that she is very easy to befriend to. Laura is very protective of her brother Sean and also can be quick to jump to conclusions, as seen when she mistook Ken for an enemy wanting to be heard Sean before the latter informed her about the misunderstanding. Tekken. Armor King is a title rather than a singular character. It turns out that there are two of them, and both are brothers. The two Armor Kings come from a family of luchadores and fought together as a tag team. Armor King also traveled in search of worthy opponents to face one-on-one, and it was one of these excursions that he came across another wrestler in a jaguar mask, who went by the similar title of King. Intrigued, Armor King went head-to-head with King in a fierce battle, which he ultimately lost after sustaining an eye injury. Embittered by his loss and the future success of King, a rivalry developed between the two. When Armor King came to notice the King of the Iron Fist tournament, a mixed martial arts contest in which his rival was participating, hoping to raise funds for the orphanage he ran, he too entered, determined to settle the score. While Armor King would go on to lose a second time, the two went on to become friends and sparring partners, and their rivalry became more friendly. While having a fierce fighting spirit, never backing down from a fight, and doggedly pursuing his rivals, Armor King has a warm heart, sharing a close bond with his brother, and willing to put aside rivalries in favor of friendship. Armor King is also a sociable person and enjoys liquor, particularly when celebrating victories with his young protege, King 2. Eddie Gordo is a master of capoeira, a martial art that combines dance, fighting, and acrobatics. He was an apprentice of the legendary capoeira master, who is grandfather to Christy Monteiro, his possible love interest. Eddie Gordo was born into a wealthy family in Brazil. Ever since he was a small boy, he knew he would one day take over the family business. He was well liked in his hometown because he was a hard worker who treated others as his equals. But tragedy struck when his father was killed trying to take down the drug business. Following his father's wishes, he went to prison where he would endure the infernal environment. Not a day went by that Eddie didn't vow to get even with his father's killers. One day during a prison riot, he watched an old man with great power fight using a technique he called capoeira. For 8 years, Eddie practiced until he became a master and could be considered a lethal weapon. Upon his release from prison, Eddie heard about the King of the Iron Fist Tournament 3 and the Mishima Saibatsu. He decided to enter the tournament believing he could persuade the MFE to help him seek his long-awaited revenge. Catarina Alves is an aggressive, sassy mouth talker with a cocky and slightly flirtatious personality. She did, however, greatly respect her adoptive father, who recently disappeared and was transformed into G Corporation's brainwashed mutated human, Gigas. Catarina seems to be very confident in her abilities as a fighter. Alongside her cocky attitude, her fighting pose has her guard totally lowered, contrary to a traditional savate stance, and her posture is completely relaxed. Dominic Santiago is one of the most memorable characters in the popular Gears of War franchise. His death was one of the most tragic moments of the series. Dominic Santiago was known for his outright loyalty to his friend and some fear in the COG High Command that this loyalty conflicts with loyalty to the COG. During the raid at Asphalt Point, Dom was horrified at himself when integrating an Austri civilian, making wonder how a loving father and husband can threaten an unarmed woman. After the Battle of Asphalt Fields and the death of his brother, he made a promise to himself that he would make sure that he never loses his loved ones. After the death of his wife, Dom was brought to the breaking point until he'd realized that someone took care of Maria after she left Jacinto, due to the fact that she was recently captured by the Locust Horde, leaving her 11 years with the Stranded until her demise. However, his closure with Maria was unable to stop him from continued problems, leading to him to becoming a physically and psychologically changed man. Isabella Keyes originally starred as an antagonist in the video game series Dead Rising. She is one of the best strong Latinas in video games from character styling, development, and game usage. Originally a villain, Isabella does a 180 in the first installment of Dead Rising, and it's only up from there. Not only is she one of the most well-rounded Hispanic characters in gaming, but also one of the most well-rounded in the Dead Rising franchise, allowing her to be an actual character instead of a pawn to gameplay. In Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, there is Carlos Oliveira. Carlos Oliveira is a mercenary of the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service. The UBCS are only mercenaries, hired hands. A man of mixed Latino, American, and indigenous origins, Carlos was an active member of the communist guerrilla operations in South America. After government forces wiped out his organization, he was scouted by Umbrella Corporation to join their UBCS Special Ops unit. His expertise in heavy weaponry and vehicle maintenance made him a valuable asset. He is warm-hearted and is known to joke around. Perhaps as a result of being raised amidst violence, he is brave and always willing to throw himself in the middle of danger. He teams up with Jill in a fight to escape the city and also battling against a hulking bow monster called Nemesis. When Jill was infected by the virus, he took care of the unconscious woman for 2 days, then headed to the hospital where he found a cure, but also a traitor in the ranks of the UBCS, Nikolai. Carlos would warn Jill to not trust Nikolai, and then after a battle with a monster, Carlos, Jill, and Barry escaped the ill-fated Raccoon City, which was destroyed by a missile. Although we have not seen him again until Resident Evil Umbrella Chronicles, he is still a very memorable character. Javier Garcia is one of the main protagonists of the third season of Telltale's The Walking Dead. He is Cuban American and was once a professional baseball player. He was kicked out of the league, however, after he was caught betting on his own games, a scandal that went into the news and was still remembered by some survivors even for 4 years after the apocalypse. He once played a minor league game in Arkansas before he was expelled, commissioning a charter plane to fly him there. When the outbreak began, his father had died and was reprimanded by his family for not being on time to say goodbye. But then he sees that his father was zombified and was forced to put him out of his misery. Javi is portrayed in accordance to the player's choices, though in almost all circumstances he takes the position of an arbitrator and the voice of reason, deliberating between equally viable options in a manner that seeks to disarm any opposition within or outside of his group, such as when Clementine and Eli get into an altercation over void bullets, where he can either attempt to support Clementine or ask her to calm down, or when his family gets caught using supplies that belong to the New Frontier and he must attempt to negotiate. In both scenarios, Javi proves to be a capable combatant, managing to knock out Lonnie after a brief struggle and successfully disarmed Eli despite him attempting to stab him with a blade. The player can determine whether or not Javi is somewhat immoral, irrational, or uncaring. This is evident in his ignorance towards consequences of his actions, stealing supplies from the New Frontier, or shooting a fleeing member of a New Frontier despite the group's insurmountable force. Javi is sardonic and witty, easily exchanging jabs with Clementine and Cade. He is quite charismatic and is mentioned to be able to charm his way out of most situations, and is seen to do exactly that with characters such as Clementine and Trip, who come to trust him quite quickly due to his amicable disposition. It is also known that he is bisexual, as he could develop an attraction to Paul Monroe, aka Jesus. And no, it's not the Jesus of the Holy Bible, but he is called that due to the resemblance of the Son of God and his humility. A memorable Latino character in the game Killzone is Rico Velázquez. Rico Velázquez is one of the main characters of the Killzone series and is best friends with Jan Templar and Thomas Shevchenko. According to story, he was born in the slums of Vecta City and was a natural-born fighter. But his family had a small restaurant in which the most loved dish was arroz con gandules, which is a very popular Puerto Rican dish, especially with pernil. Moving on, after a few months of aimless wandering and even drifting into petty crime, he decided to join the ISA Army at the age of 18. Even during training, Rico's phenomenal strength and willingness to fight set him apart from other ISA regulars. Upon graduation, he was promoted to sergeant and assigned to an all-rookie platoon codenamed H Company. Even though he is a great soldier, he is very hateful and racist towards Helghast, as he calls them Higs. He even tried to execute Gregor Haka, who was a Helghast half-breed, but was stopped by Templar. His attitude often gets the best of him, which causes the death of Garza in Killzone 2, killing Emperor Visari, and nearly getting into a fight with Captain Jason Narville. In Killzone and Killzone Liberation, he has more Latin American traits, but he looks more African American in later games. Now, there are many Latinos that are white, but there's many of them that have a lighter or darker shade of brown. There are many other Latino characters such as Miles Morales in the recent Spider-Man video game by Insomniac Games for the PS4. We all loved Miles since his debut in the comics. Like Peter Parker before him, he suffers a loss and will become the successor of the iconic hero by taking the mantle of Spider-Man. Tyson Rios in Army of Two, he has a tattoo that says Vaya con Dios, which means go with God. He certainly isn't a stereotype, which is all the more reason to love him when you find out he's Mexican American. Garcia Hotspur in Shadows of the Damned is like a Hispanic version of Dante from the Devil May Cry series. All in all, he's just a badass Mexicano who just wants to save his girlfriend and does it all with a shape-shifting demon named Johnson. Carmen Sandiego, who is dumb enough to forget about this woman? We all remember her in video games and also her cartoon series. Not to forget, she's also the best criminal of all time. Steve Cortez from Mass Effect is another good example. Although a fairly minor character, he is known to be down to earth. Not to forget, so many fans sympathize and feel bad for him when he learns his husband died. Other well-known Latinos in video games are Javier Hidalgo and his daughter Manuela from Resident Evil Darkside Chronicles, Reyes Vidal from Mass Effect Andromeda, Ángel de la Muerte from Saints Row 2, Catalina from the GTA series of video games, Mavado from Mortal Kombat, Miguel Rojo from Tekken, and so many more. Also from the GTA series we have Latino characters such as Miguel, Victor Vance, Humberto Robina, and so on. Some of these are NPCs with interesting stories, while others are playable. The WCW and WWE video games feature our most loved Latino wrestlers such as the late Eddie Guerrero, Chavo Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, and so on. And finally, to wrap this up, I think that it's great to have Latino characters in gaming as much as I like black characters, LGBT characters, and so on. The thing about Latino characters being so awesome is that it's not about them being Latino, like I said earlier. It's about who they are, what they do, when they do it, and why they do what they are destined to do in the story. That can be a juicy part to play, because you can go so many places with that as long as you don't try to make it about their ethnicity. I'm proud to have done this not only because I'm a Latino, but in the future I would love to see more Latino characters being represented in video games. Character representation of demographics is a good thing, but race, gender, and ethnicity shouldn't be the most important part of a character. It's what he or she does and how their stories are told and how we can relate to them. Before I close, I want to encourage all of the Latinos in the industry, men and women, this. And I'm going to say this to you in Spanish since I am a Latino of Dominican heritage. Todos queremos que los latinos sean representados en cine, televisión y videojuegos. No debemos depender muchísimo de otros escritores y desarrolladores para crear algo que nos represente. Solo ustedes tienen el gran potencial para crear algo muy bueno que pueda representar su comunidad en entretenimiento, sea en la industria del cine, televisión o videojuegos y cómics también. Todos podemos hacerlo con amor y dedicación siempre a lo que nos gusta. Hasta la próxima, gamers. Este es Jan de Video Games in the World. Sigan jugando y hasta la próxima. Adiós.